Isaiah 53. So this whole part is about Jesus. And so people did not believe, but this but it did happen. And it's interesting that Jesus was written about him, like he grew up before God like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. So that's a really like tender way of talking about Jesus. And then he was despised and abandoned by men, a man of great pain and familiar with sickness. So I feel like throughout Jesus' life, maybe he was like not like a strong, healthy child, carpenter's son, like I envision him to be. But today, like this kind of popped out of me that he might have been a very sickly person throughout most of his life, and that's why he's despised by men. And it never really occurred to me to look at Jesus in that way. And it kind of makes sense because he kind of slept on like a boat during a storm. So it might not just be that he was peaceful. It might be like he was weary, like he was physically exhausted and sickly. But people like despised him. And then it was our sicknesses that he himself bore. I feel like we focus on the death and resurrection of Jesus, but because his grown, like the days up to like 30 years old is so obscured, it wasn't written down to us. We didn't know how it was. But what if he was sick throughout his life, bearing these sicknesses, like for us, that we ourselves bore, that he suffered way before the crucifixion. So, and then this talks about how he was afflicted and his punishment, his crucifixion. By his wounds we are healed, like sheep we have gone astray. And then this is talking about his crucifixion that we are very familiar with. And then he died. And then he was assigned with wicked men because he died a crucifixion death, which is for criminal. And even on death on a tree, the cross, which is considered to be a curse. Any man who died on a tree is a curse from God. But then he was put in a rich man's tomb. He has done no violence and no deceit in his mouth. But God desired to cause him grief as a guilt offering. But then he will see his offspring, and he will prolong his days. Actually, he's going to live forever. And the good pleasure of the Lord will prosper in his hand. And because the result of the anguish with his soul, and we saw the anguish of his soul when he bled while his sweat became blood while praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. Then we will see it, because the result we will see it and be satisfied. And by his knowledge, the righteous one will justify the many. So he did justify, like right now, his death is our justification. His death is why God looked at us and say that we're righteous instead of saying we're sinners, for those that believe in Jesus Christ and call on his name. And then he will have a portion with the great. God will allot him a portion with the great. And then because he poured out his life unto death, yet he himself bore the sin of many, and he interceded for the wrongdoers. Jesus did that, no one else. Jesus did. And just amen.